This starving dog was ignored until a kind stranger did this. A single shutter click pierced the tense silence, echoing across the vacant lot like a signal flare in a dark sky. Regina's heart pounded as she carefully lowered her camera, struggling to process the scene that had just unfolded before her lens. At a glance, it could have been any forsaken corner of the city: discarded cardboard boxes, piles of refuse swarming with insects, crumbling concrete walls streaked with graffiti and neglect. But in that haunted moment, her focus locked on something else entirely: a pair of eyes staring back at her from behind a crumpled metal garbage can. They were hollow, desperate eyes, like the eyes of someone who had lived a lifetime of misery in only a few short months. And that someone happened to be a dog. Frail and bony, its ribs sharply outlined beneath patchy fur, the dog appeared to fade into the background like a ghost that had learned to accept its own invisibility. Everything about this creature spoke of a silent, hidden agony. Regina's breath caught in her throat. She glanced around, almost expecting someone else, anyone else, to step forward and address what she was seeing. But no one did. It seemed like the world had abandoned this dog to starve, as if it didn't exist at all. Has it always been this way, ignored by an indifferent city? Regina, newly arrived in this rundown neighborhood on an urban photography assignment, knew in that instant that she was about to capture more than a photo. Something was stirring in her. Yet even as her conscience roared, the dog retreated another inch into the darkness. Perhaps it had grown accustomed to footsteps that passed without so much as a glance, used to the stench of decay and the press of nightfall cold on unprotected bones. Regina felt a pang of shame for every moment she'd spent ignoring the half-buried tragedies that always lurked beneath a city's shine. She knelt on the damp pavement and inched forward, ignoring the sticky sensation seeping through her jeans. As she extended a trembling hand, her palm upward in a gesture of peace, the dog's ears flattened against its head. For a painful second, Regina feared it would flee, but it simply stayed there, trembling. Under the faint glow of a distant, the dog's fur looked dull and crusted with dirt, but more than that, it looked lost. Regina cursed inwardly, realizing she didn't have any food in her backpack, just camera lenses and a bottle of water. Swallowing hard, she slid the water bottle out, fumbling a little as she unscrewed the cap. The dog's head lifted slightly, its cracked muzzle twitching, as if trying to detect any scent of sustenance. Heart twinging, Regina inched closer still and poured a small puddle of water in the palm of her hand, carefully extending it. This was the moment that changed everything. The dog leaned forward, eyes wide with uncertainty, and tentatively let its tongue flick across her hand. Regina felt how parched the animal was, how that tiny trace of water might be the only drop it had tasted in a day, or two, or three. It was impossible to know how long it had gone without, or how many heartbreaks it had endured at the hands of careless. The dog flinched back immediately, as if afraid she might snatch her hand away or strike a blow. But when Regina offered more water, it crept forward again, the thirst too potent to resist. A wave of raw empathy rolled over Regina in that moment, stronger than anything she had felt in a long time. She didn't think about what she was doing, didn't weigh the risks or consequences. She just knew that she couldn't leave that starved creature out here to die. Setting her camera gently aside, she leaned in to examine the dog more closely. Fleas, ticks, open sores, a raw, festering wound beneath its belly. The dog might have been beautiful once, with a coat that shimmered gold or chocolate under the sun. Now it was a tangle of disease and heartbreak. Regina cringed as the dog whimpered, swaying a little on unsteady legs, before sinking to the ground with a trembling sigh. A million questions clamored for space in Regina's mind. Why was this dog here, alone and ignored? Had it once had a home, a family, or a name? Guilt speared her for even hesitating. She had a small studio apartment, not much space or money to spare. But one thing was certain: she couldn't walk away now. Cradling the dog as if it might shatter in her arms, Regina realized she was shaking too. A sour smell clung to its matted fur, but she didn't recoil. Instead, she whispered a string of reassurances, voice trembling with tears she hadn't yet allowed to fall. It nuzzled weakly into her chest, possibly sensing that, for the first time in a very, very long while, it wasn't alone. She retrieved an old flannel shirt from her bag, the one she used to clean her camera lenses in emergencies. Slipping it under the dog for support, she gingerly lifted it. It was distressingly light, more bones than flesh. But the dog didn't snap or growl. It simply let itself be held, so devoid of energy that resistance seemed impossible. Regina carefully maneuvered back through the alley, stepping around broken glass and piles of debris. In her mind, a voice kept screaming, "Hurry, hurry. This dog has no time left." At the street corner stood a dented bus stop sign. A single nearby flickered ominously, giving the night an undercurrent of eerie unpredictability. Regina glanced around. The city roads, typically so congested, seemed almost haunted at this hour. She knew the nearest emergency vet clinic was several blocks away, but she was too far from her own car, parked in a paid lot on the other side of the neighborhood. The bus would have to do. The wait was excruciating. Every second felt like an hour. With the trembling dog in her arms, she paced in small circles, fighting off panicked thoughts. What if the clinic was closed? What if they wouldn't admit the dog without immediate payment? She tried to steady her breaths. A bus rumbled in the distance, headlights cutting through the murky gloom. Relief pulsed through her veins. When the doors wheezed open, the driver, a gruff man in a faded uniform, looked alarmed. His gaze fell on the dog with undisguised pity. "You can't bring that," he started, but one look at Regina's tear-streaked face caused him to trail off. She stared at him, silently begging for mercy. He hesitated a moment, then jerked his head in a nod, motioning for her to board without a fee. She whispered a choked "thank you" and found a seat near the back, keeping the dog protectively wrapped in her arms. The bus ride felt both interminable and fleeting. Time was measured by each shallow breath that rattled from the dog's chest. Passengers cast nervous glances, some politely averting their eyes, others clearly annoyed by the ragged creature. Regina tightened her hold, determined not to let shame or discomfort undermine the dog's chance for survival. Occasionally, she felt the animal tremor against her body, as though dreaming of shadows chasing it from a dark past. At the next stop, the driver called out to Regina. "The clinic is 2 blocks down to your right," he said in a hushed tone. His eyes flickered with a mixture of sternness and compassion. Regina nodded and carefully disembarked, the dog's frail body pressed close. She ran the remaining distance, ignoring the cramp in her side and the sting of the cold night air. The emergency vet clinic came into view at last, a fluorescent sign buzzing with that sterile hum that typically made her uneasy. Tonight, it was a beacon of hope. Regina burst through the doors, gasping for air as a receptionist started, wide-eyed, at the sight of the trembling dog in her arms. The next minutes were a blur of professional urgency. A vet tech hurried forward with a gurney. Regina lowered the dog onto the sterile metal, feeling it try and fail to stand. As they whisked the dog into the back, Regina struggled to follow. A nurse stopped her gently, hand on her shoulder. "We need you to wait here," she said, compassion softening her voice. "We'll do everything we can." Regina nodded, chest heavy, as the staff disappeared behind swinging doors. Left alone in the stark waiting room, the adrenaline drained out of her, leaving her quivering. The distant beep of medical equipment made her stomach clench. A battered magazine lay on a small table near a cluster of plastic chairs, but reading felt impossible. Instead, she paced, chewing her lip until it nearly bled, running through potential scenarios. Would the dog survive the night? Was it already too late? An hour. That's how long she waited. Through to Regina, it might have been a lifetime. Finally, the doors swung open. A veterinarian approached, wearing scrubs streaked with what looked like antiseptic solution, her eyes solemn but kind. She's severely malnourished, the vet began, and in critical condition. We've started her on fluids and are running blood tests. There's a risk of organ failure, especially considering how advanced her starvation is. But she's a fighter. She paused, letting that sink in. She also has several infections, likely from untreated wounds. We'll treat her, but she's got a tough road ahead. Regina exhaled shakily, pressing her lips together. Thank you, she managed. The vet nodded. She's not out of the woods, but we'll do everything we can. You did the right thing bringing her in. Everything about that night buzzed in Regina's memory like a neon sign. The hurried footsteps in the alley, the hush of that deserted corner, the dog's desperate lapping at the water in her palm. Overwhelmed, she sank into a plastic chair. In her mind's eye, she replayed the initial discovery, how easy it would have been to walk away. Countless other people probably had. But in that single moment of choice, Regina had veered off the path of indifference. She felt, with absolute conviction, that she was meant to save this dog. The night wore on, and the buzzing adrenaline gave way to an empty kind of weariness. Regina felt the weight of her camera bag slung across her shoulder, reminding her of the original reason she'd been wandering that neighborhood. Her photography was supposed to document the forgotten corners of the city, old laundromats, deserted playgrounds, weathered chain-link fences. Ironically, she'd done just that, but in a way no camera could truly capture. She had a documented heartbreak tonight. After what felt like eternity, a nurse approached again. She's stable for now, the nurse said gently. We'd like to keep her overnight. We'll run more tests in the morning. Regina nodded, tears smudging the corners of her eyes. Is there anything I can do? She asked softly. Honestly, you've done a lot. She wouldn't have lasted much longer. If she pulls through, she'll need a lot of care. Rehabilitation, medication, possibly surgery for her wounds. But we'll keep you posted. Go home and get some rest, okay? Regina's chest tightened. The thought of leaving the dog behind felt painful, but exhaustion consumed her. She realized she had no clue how she would pay the veterinary bills, no idea how to handle the responsibilities of caring for a dog, especially one so fragile. But her mind was already made up. She wouldn't abandon the creature a second time. She walked home, the city lights shimmering in a way she had never noticed. They seemed mocking, each neon sign a testament to people's ability to keep moving while suffering lingered in dark corners. Regina reached her small apartment as the sun began to stain the horizon with faint pink. She collapsed onto her worn couch, hugging a pillow in place of the trembling body she had held. She didn't sleep so much as drift in and out of anxious half-dreams. At some point, tears trickled down her cheeks, unstoppable. She felt an unfamiliar rawness in her chest, a sense of responsibility so heavy it made her breath hitch. Morning arrived with a ring on her phone. She jolted awake, scrambling to answer with a burst of alarm. It was the vet. She made it through the night, the voice on the other end said. But she's not out of danger. Could you come in? We need to talk about her care plan. Regina tossed on some clothes, not caring about the wrinkles or mismatched colors, and hurried out. At the clinic, the receptionist waved her through. Inside, the veterinarian doctor Singh, her name tag read, ushered Regina into a small office. She's too weak to stand on her own, Dr. Singh explained gently, and her weight is extremely low. We're treating infections and stabilizing her vitals. The next 72 hours will be critical. After that, the real work of rehabilitation begins. Are you prepared for that? Regina swallowed hard. Yes. She had no idea how she'd manage, but the commitment was unwavering. Vet bills can be substantial, Dr. Singh continued, her tone cautious. If finances are a concern, we can discuss payment plans or talk to local rescue groups. There's also the option of handing her over to a shelter if you can't. No, Regina said more firmly than she'd expected, surprising even herself. She's coming home with me as soon as she's ready. I'll figure everything out. Respect flitted across Dr. Singh's face. All right, we'll do our best to keep costs minimal. In the meantime, I can try reaching out to some rescue organizations for assistance with certain procedures." Regina exhaled, relief and apprehension swirling. A rescue dog in a cramped studio apartment, not exactly what she'd envisioned for her life. But one look at Dr. Singh's expression reminded her that the alternative was unthinkable. Days slipped into a tense routine. Regina visited the clinic every chance she got, her camera forgotten in a corner, collecting dust. Each visit revealed minuscule improvements. The dog's heartbeat steadier, her wounds slowly closing, her eyes once again reflecting a faint glimmer of hope. One day, as Regina stood by the dog's kennel, the poor creature lifted her head enough to make eye contact. Something akin to recognition sparked there, an acknowledgement of the stranger who had held her in that trash-strewn alley and refused to walk away. Tears blurred Regina's vision. She reached through the bars and gently brushed her fingers along the dog's muzzle. The dog licked them once tentatively. Dr. Singh, watching from nearby, nodded in approval. "That's a good sign," she murmured. "She trusts you." Regina felt warmth flood her chest, a fierce protectiveness she never could have guessed she possessed. "What should I call her?" she asked, glancing at Dr. Singh. "It feels wrong not to use a name." The vet considered a moment, a gentle smile tugging at her lips. "Names are powerful. They give us something to hold on to. Maybe wait a bit, see what fits her personality." But Regina's mind was already spinning. She wanted to name the dog something that spoke of hope, of resilience. A name that reminded her of how close to the brink this dog had been, and how determined she was now to give her a fighting chance. That evening, as she left the clinic, Regina felt the word hope echo in her mind. It was simple, perhaps a bit, but it resonated with every beat of her anxious heart. "Hope," she whispered, letting the name linger on her tongue. She envisioned the dog's hollow eyes shining with a spark of life, and decided right then. The next time she visited, that's what she would call her. On the 5th day, the clinic allowed Regina to bring the dog, Hope, home. She arrived early, overwhelmed by a mixture of excitement and dread. Dr. Singh and the vet techs armed her with instructions: how to administer antibiotics, how to sanitize the healing wounds, how to carefully measure her food. Regina nodded diligently, absorbing every detail as though studying for the most important test of her life. When they finally rolled out the small kennel, Regina's heart melted. Hope's eyes flickered toward her, uncertain but not afraid. Slowly, the vet tech helped Regina ease Hope into a soft harness. She weighed next to nothing, but she was alive. That was all that mattered. Back in her tiny apartment, Regina settled Hope onto an old comforter spread across the floor. The dog immediately tried to stand, legs wobbling, but managed only to shuffle a step before collapsing. Regina winced with sympathy, hurrying to support her. Over the next hour, she slowly introduced Hope to the space. A bowl of clean water nearby, a shallow dish of the special high-calorie food Dr. Singh had given her, soft towels for bedding. Hope sniffed it all, though with visible anxiety. This was an entirely new world, and she was too weak to explore it at will. Regina sat cross-legged beside Hope, gently stroking the patchy fur and murmuring comforts. The dog's eyes fluttered closed. Little by little, Regina felt the tension in Hope's body relax, as if the dog had finally found a moment of safety in this harsh universe. That night, Regina slept on the floor as well, one hand resting lightly on Hope's back. She awoke multiple times to administer medication or help the dog shift positions. There were times she worried that the ragged breathing would stop altogether. But it didn't. Each rasp of breath was a testament to Hope's will to live. In the following weeks, Regina's life underwent a transformation more profound than she ever would have imagined. She scheduled her photography shoots around Hope's feeding times. She learned to budget for medical expenses, cutting back on takeout coffees, renting out her camera gear for small commercial gigs, even taking on some late-night shifts at a friend's printing studio. Her landlord complained about a dog in the building, but Regina managed to convince him that Hope was more akin to a hospice patient than a typical pet, promising to keep noise and mess under control. Every morning she woke early to check Hope's temperature, coax her into eating spoonfuls of special food, and administer medications. Slowly, Hope's weight began to inch upward. The dog's coat thickened. Patches of fur that had been rubbed raw started to regrow. Gone was the total emptiness in her gaze, replaced with tentative curiosity. Though she was still timid and prone to trembling at loud noises, there were fleeting moments of tail wags, shy, delicate gestures that made Regina's chest fill with an emotion so big it nearly hurt. Hope's first steps outdoors were an emotional milestone. The vet had instructed Regina to take her out for short intervals of gentle exercise. On that day, Regina bundled up, autumn winds had arrived, and carried Hope down the building's narrow staircase. Setting the dog carefully on the sidewalk, she stayed close, ready to catch her if she stumbled. Hope sniffed at the air, uncertain. A passing delivery truck made her flinch, but after a few moments she tried a shaky step forward. Then another. Regina, crouched beside her, felt tears prick at her eyes. Neighbors strolled by, some casting curious or pitying looks. A few months prior, Regina herself might have been one of those unaware, uninvested. But now, seeing Hope put one wobbly paw in front of the other, she felt an indescribable rush of pride. Still, the road to recovery was far from smooth. Hope's digestive system was fragile, and there were nights Regina woke to the sound of the dog retching. She'd leap from bed, nerves on fire, to soothe Hope and clean up. At other times, Hope's old injuries flare up, causing the dog to cry out in pain. Regina would be on the phone with the vet at 3 in the morning, voice thick with desperation. Each time Dr. Singh patiently talked her through what to do. "She's been through so much," the vet often said. "You're doing everything you can. Keep believing in her." And Regina did believe. Each wag of that thin tail, each grateful lick, each spark of light in Hope's eyes recharged Regina's determination. During a routine checkup, Dr. Singh suggested Regina reach out to animal rescue organizations that specialize in severe neglect cases. They often have volunteers who assist with rehab visits, donation drives, and sometimes sponsor veterinary costs. Regina hesitated. Her pride resisted the idea of asking for help. But she also knew the bills were piling up and that more extensive procedures might be needed. Hope's hind legs, in particular, showed signs of damage that could require surgery in the future. Reluctantly, Regina made a few calls. To her surprise, she was met with not just empathy, but genuine enthusiasm. One small rescue, called New Beginnings, organized a home visit. Regina spent hours tidying her apartment, worried they might disapprove of her cramped space. But when the volunteer arrived, a warm-hearted woman named, she took one look at Hope curled shyly on her blanket and melted into tears. "You saved her," murmured, stroking Hope's head. "Don't worry about space or anything else. It's clear she's getting the best love possible." Over tea, Regina shared every detail of Hope's journey, from the alley to the bus, to the nights sleeping on the floor. She confessed her fears about covering the mounting medical bills. Nodded, flipping open a notebook. "We can help. We'll set up a fundraiser online, share Hope's story on our social media, maybe even do a small event at our shelter." Regina's cheeks warmed with gratitude. It felt surreal that people, complete strangers, might care about a dog they'd never met. But as she recalled the emptiness in Hope's eyes that first night, and how that emptiness had gradually filled with life, she realized that such transformations had the power to touch hearts anywhere. Left with dozens of photos, some Regina had snapped of Hope's progress. She also left with the promise of hope for Regina herself. In the days that followed, the rescue's online fundraiser gained modest traction. Small donations from people moved by the story of a starving dog found in a trash-strewn alley. Regina wasn't sure how many people would see or care, but each notification of a new donation felt like a tiny miracle. As hope grew stronger, Regina made a conscious effort to re-enter the world she had paused. She took on a few photography assignments, always racing back home to check on Hope afterward. But that was the new normal, and she had made peace with it. Late one afternoon, she was rummaging in her closet for an old camera lens when Hope let out a bone-chilling growl. Regina froze. She'd never heard Hope growl, whine, yelp, even bark quietly in her sleep, but never a deep, guttural sound like this. Heart thudding, Regina hurried out into the living room. Hope stood stiff-legged near the door, hackles raised, trembling from nose to tail. Regina's eyes darted around. Has someone knocked? She peered through the peephole, nobody. Yet Hope didn't relax. The dog stared at the window, the one facing the dark alley behind the building. Regina's adrenaline surged. She crossed the room softly and tugged the curtain aside. Nothing out there but a flickering street lamp and some overflowing dumpsters. But Hope continued to bristle, her body language screaming alarm. Regina tried to soothe her, gently stroking her back. After several minutes, Hope's growls subsided into uneasy whines. Something had spooked her, though Regina had no idea what. That night, as Regina drifted off on the couch, she'd grown accustomed to sleeping near Hope. She remembered the times she had woken to find the dog shaking in terror, eyes wide and unseeing. Maybe this was another flashback of some sort, a traumatic memory triggered by a sound or a scent. Regina whispered assurances into Hope's ear until the dog's breathing evened out. The next morning, Regina couldn't shake the eerie feeling. She decided to be extra cautious, especially on walks. Perhaps something from Hope's past lingered, someone who had abused her or even recognized her. The very thought knotted her stomach, and she resolved to keep a watchful eye. But for the next few days, life carried on with relative calm. Hope continued her gentle progress, and Regina's schedule balanced precariously between photography gigs and dog care. The memory of that growl slipped to the back of her mind until the phone call. It came one evening after she'd finished editing photos. The screen displayed a number she didn't recognize. Regina answered, expecting a wrong number or telemarketer, only to be greeted by a gravelly male voice. "You that girl with the dog?" The question was abrupt, laced with something that made Regina's hair stand on end. Her throat tightened. "Who is this?" "You found a dog in the alley, people talk. That dog belongs to someone you know." His tone dripped with possessiveness and a hint of threat. Regina's heart hammered. "I'm sorry, but she was starving and—" "Not your business," he snarled. "Return her or you'll regret it." The line clicked dead. Regina stood there, phone clutched in a shaking hand, adrenaline flooding her system. She stared at Hope, who was curled up on the blanket, blissfully unaware of the menace that had just crackled through the phone. Could that man possibly be the person who had neglected or abused Hope? The idea churned Regina's stomach. She thought of calling the police, but what would she say? She had no evidence, only a phone call. The dog had no microchip or identifying features that proved prior ownership. In fact, legally, Hope was now under Regina's guardianship after being treated by the vet and recognized as a rescue case. Yet the fear lingered. Regina locked the door, double-checked the windows, and tried to gather her thoughts. She reported the call to at New Beginnings, who advised her to document everything and consider filing a police report if another call came. Meanwhile, Dr. Singh recommended vigilance and possibly investing in additional locks. The sense of threat loomed like a storm cloud over Regina's small world. One night, about a week later, Regina came home from a photo shoot to find her apartment door ajar. A jolt of panic sent her mind spinning. She hurried inside, calling Hope's name. The dog cowered behind the couch, trembling, eyes wide with terror. Items were scattered on the floor, her mail, a few books, a broken vase. But nothing appeared stolen. Instead, it was as if someone had rummaged around briefly and then fled. Regina's heart pounded. She knelt beside Hope, gathering the terrified dog in her arms. By the time she calmed Hope enough to do a thorough check, it was clear that the intruder had left quickly, maybe spooked by something. Regina filed a police report, hands shaking as she described the phone call and the break-in. An officer took notes, asked a few questions, then left with a noncommittal promise to keep an eye out. That night, Regina barely slept. She barricaded the door with furniture. Whenever hope stirred, Regina jolted awake, expecting to find some shadowy figure looming over them. It felt like a nightmare she couldn't escape, but even in the grip of fear, Regina's resolve hardened. If someone believed they had a claim to hope, if they were the reason for her scars and starved condition, Regina would fight tooth and nail to keep her safe. She reached out to friends for advice, eventually deciding to install a small camera outside her door, the cost be damned. Better safe than sorry. In the days that followed, the phone remained silent, and no one returned to the apartment. Regina wondered if she'd overreacted, but the possibility of danger simmered beneath every routine moment. Every time she walked Hope down the street, her eyes flicked anxiously over, scanning for anyone who might be watching too closely. Through it all, Hope continued her slow journey toward healing. Perhaps sensing Regina's nerves, the dog clung closer than ever. She would curl at Regina's feet while she edited photos late at night. She greeted Regina at the door with a tender, cautious wag. And each small improvement in her health, like the day she managed to climb the apartment stairs on her own, was a cause for celebration. It felt like Hope was determined to leave her dark past behind. By the time winter began to creep into the city, with winds that howled through the narrow streets and dusted window panes with frost, Hope had nearly doubled in weight. Her fur was growing back in thick, soft patches, though a few scars remained as silent witnesses to her old life. Regina's schedule was more hectic than ever, balancing dog care, photography, side gigs, and her heightened vigilance, but she'd found a kind of rhythm in it. Friends started to notice a change in Regina. She smiled more, even when tired. Her photography took on a new depth, capturing not just the gritty corners of the city but the resilience thriving in them. When people asked what inspired her, she would shrug and think of a dog who had once been invisible but now shone with gentle spirit. One day, after a brief outing in the snow, Hope awkwardly plodding in the powder, uncertain of the strange coldness on her paws, Regina checked her email to find a surprising message. It was from a popular social media page dedicated to animal rescue stories. They had come across Hope's tale through New Beginnings and wanted to feature it. Regina stared at the screen, a slow smile spreading. The idea of thousands, maybe millions, of people reading about Hope's journey was daunting, but also thrilling. She replied with a cautious yes. That week, her phone buzzed incessantly. The post went viral. People were captivated by the before and after photos, by the alley rescue, by the simple act of kindness that blossomed into unwavering devotion. Donations to the rescue spiked, along with messages of support, concern, and, of course, heartbreak over Hope's initial condition. Regina was inundated with new followers on her photography account, many of whom left comments praising her compassion. A few even reached out with personal stories of dogs they had rescued. It was overwhelming but also uplifting. For Regina, the real star was always Hope herself. The dog, oblivious to the sudden surge of internet fame, only cared about the warmth of Regina's presence, the security of a steady meal, the soft comforter she now adored. With every gentle kiss on Regina's hand, it was as though she was saying thank you over and over. Just as Regina dared to believe they were safe, the shadows of Hope's past emerged once more. Late one evening, as snow fell in thick clumps outside, her phone rang. This time the voice on the other end was whispery, barely audible through static. "You've made her a celebrity, huh?" came the same gravelly rasp. "You think that's going to protect you?" Regina's skin prickled. She tried to speak, but the lump in her throat made words impossible. The man continued, "She's mine. I want her back." Then the line disconnected. Regina swore, a flash of anger cutting through the fear. How could anyone have the gall to claim ownership of a dog they had left to starve? She thought of how terrified Hope had been, the open wounds, the infections. A quake of rage and protectiveness swelled. She refused to be intimidated. She called the police again, but they offered little more than a shrug. Without concrete evidence of who this person was or any verifiable threat, there was little they could do. From New Beginnings urged Regina to be cautious. "He might be bluffing," she said. "Sometimes abusers try to reclaim animals to reassert control. It's twisted, but it happens." She advised Regina to stay with a friend if possible. Regina considered it, but she was determined not to uproot her life unless absolutely necessary. Instead, she installed another security camera in the hallway and rearranged her schedule so that she was rarely out of the apartment for long periods. If the caller was trying to rattle her, it was working. She found herself peering out windows at odd hours, mind racing with worst-case scenarios. But ironically, the fear also fueled her unwavering commitment to protect Hope. One evening a few days before Christmas, a knock sounded at the door. Regina's pulse skyrocketed. She approached cautiously. "Who is it?" she demanded. "Package for Ms." A muffled voice responded. Regina exhaled, feeling foolish, and opened the door. A delivery man stood there, shoulders dusted with snow, holding a small box. She accepted it, heart still hammering. Ever since the break-in, this was her new normal, constant suspicion. After closing the door, she opened the box to find a gift from one of her photography clients, a new camera strap with her initials. The thoughtful gesture brought her to tears, emotions swirling. So many people were kind, yet one faceless person threatened everything she'd built with hope. She vowed not to let one dark soul taint the goodness she believed in. Hope's physical improvements were nothing short of remarkable. By now, she was strong enough to jump onto the couch. She greeted Regina with bright eyes and gentle tail wags each morning. Sometimes she even nuzzled Regina's hand for attention. The emotional scars were more subtle. She still cowered at sudden movements or loud noises. Yet each day brought new moments of confidence, like the time she greeted a neighbor's friendly dog in the hallway without shaking. Regina documented these small victories in her photographs, capturing Hope's soulful eyes in the winter sunlight, the faint smile that seemed to grace her canine features when she felt safe and content. She shared these glimpses on social media, not for fame, but in gratitude for everyone who had supported them along the way. And the outpouring of love was immense. Where once the city's gloom had seemed like a reflection of Regina's uncertainty, now she noticed sparks of warmth in unexpected places. The deli owner who always asked about Hope, the mail carrier who slipped dog treats into Regina's mailbox, the neighbor who offered homemade dog biscuits. It was as if Hope had become a catalyst for kindness. One frigid evening, when the moon hung low and the streets sparkled with a glaze of ice, Regina came home late from a holiday gathering at a friend's place. She'd needed a few hours to relax, to feel somewhat normal amid the swirl of tension in her life. Hope was waiting by the door, tail wagging gently. Regina scooped her into a quick hug, heart glowing with affection. She noticed the dog's anxious glance at the window but brushed it off. "We're okay," she thought. But as Regina undid her coat, a sudden crash came from the alley outside. Hope bolted upright, ears perked, body quivering. Regina's pulse leaped. She hurried to the window. At first she saw only swirling snow illuminated by then movement in the shadows, someone lingering near the building's back door. Her blood ran cold. She debated calling the police, but a surge of protectiveness overrode her fear. She grabbed a flashlight and carefully made her way to the hallway, down the steps, phone clutched in her other hand, ready to call for help if needed. Peering through the small window in the back door, she saw a hulking figure rummaging around trash bins. Was it just a vagrant, or something more sinister? Her heart hammered as she switched on the flashlight and opened the door a crack. "Hello," she called, voice unsteady. The figure turned. The glare of her flashlight revealed a harsh face, eyes narrowed with anger. Regina's stomach plummeted. Something about him radiated hostility. He stepped forward and she retreated instinctively. "Where's my dog?" He growled, voice reverberating through the cold air. Regina's voice lodged in her throat. She felt ice form in her veins. This was him, the man from the phone calls, the intruder from her nightmares. She tried to steady her voice. She's not your dog, you left her to starve." His lips curled in a sneer. "She was mine, I did what I wanted with her." He took another step and Regina realized just how tall he was. She fumbled for the doorknob, ready to slam it shut, but he lunged, forcing his way inside. A scream lodged in Regina's throat. She stumbled backward, calling for help, but her voice echoed in the deserted hallway. The man advanced, eyes gleaming with a twisted sense of entitlement. "I saw your posts. You parade her around like some trophy. You think you're a hero. She's mine," he snarled again. Adrenaline surged. Regina's mind raced. There was no one else around. Her phone was still in her pocket, but it felt like a lead weight. Could she get it out in time? Would 911 pick up fast enough? And even if the police came, how quickly could they arrive? She positioned herself in front of the stairs leading to her apartment door, heart pounding so hard it thundered in her ears. "You're not taking her," she said, voice trembling but resolute. The man's expression twisted with rage. "No, we'll see about that." He lunged. Regina yelped, darting sideways. Her only advantage was familiarity with the building layout. She scrambled up the stairs, the man in hot pursuit, cursing. She banged on her neighbor's door as she passed it, hoping to rouse someone, anyone. But there was no answer. Finally, she reached her apartment door, fumbling for her keys. But with shaking hands, she couldn't get them to align. A violent yank on her shoulder nearly wrenched her off her feet. She turned, gasping. The man's face was inches from hers, hot breath reeking of cigarettes and anger. Reflex took over. She kicked out blindly, connecting with his shin. He let out a hiss of pain, loosening his grip. Seizing the moment, Regina darted inside and tried to slam the door, but he was too fast. The door burst open. Hope, who had been cowering near the couch, let out a terrified bark. The man's focus snapped to the dog, eyes hungry and triumphant. "Gotcha," he muttered, taking a step forward. Regina's mind shrieked with desperation. She had to protect Hope. Without thinking, she yanked a heavy camera tripod from the corner and swung it. The makeshift weapon connected with the man's arm, forcing him to stagger back and howl in pain. Fury lit his eyes. He advanced again, grabbing at the tripod. It clattered to the floor. Heart in her throat, Regina realized she was outmatched physically. Her phone, she needed her phone. In a frantic motion, she reached into her pocket, only for the man to shove her aside. She crashed against a side table, vision swimming. Pain seared her ribs. He lunged for Hope, who was trembling against the wall, ears flattened in terror. "No!" Regina screamed, a raw, primal sound. Hope, cornered and desperate, did something Regina had never seen her do. She bared her teeth and growled with a ferocity that seemed impossible for a dog so gentle. As the man reached for her, she snapped, teeth clicking just shy of his hand. He yelped, jerking back in shock. In that split second of hesitation, Regina sprang forward, ramming into him with all her weight. They both crashed to the ground, wrestling in a tangle of limbs and curses. Somehow, Regina managed to scramble free. She spotted her phone lying on the floor, must have fallen out of her pocket. She lunged for it, heart pounding. The man rose, face a mask of fury. Just as she wrapped her fingers around the phone, he seized her wrist, twisting it savagely. Agony shot up her arm. She screeched, but she refused to let go. With her free hand, she clawed at his face, nails scraping skin. With a roar, he loosened his grip to protect his face. Regina pulled free, phone in hand, and backpedaled until she was near the kitchen counter. Her mind reeled with pain, but she managed to dial 911. The ringtone beeps once, then again. "Pick up, pick up." Her entire being screamed for help. Behind her, the man saw what she was doing. He grabbed a nearby mug and threw it at her. It smashed against the wall, shards flying. Hope yelped. The line clicked. 911, what's your emergency? "He's attacking me." Regina sobbed into the phone. "Send help, please." Before she could say more, the man lunged, knocking the phone from her hand. It skittered across the floor, still connected. Regina was cornered. Blood dribbled from a cut on her temple. She raised trembling hands in a defensive posture, mind whirling with terror. Just then, footsteps thundered in the hallway. Through the shattered doorway, Regina glimpsed a neighbor, a burly man from 2 doors down, charging in with a baseball bat. "Hey, what's going on?" he bellowed. She'd never been so grateful to see another human being. The intruder spun toward the new threat. The neighbor brandished the bat. "Get away from her, or I swear." The man snarled, but with sirens already wailing in the distance. Regina's frantic 911 call had gone through. He hesitated. A flicker of doubt crossed his face. Then, muttering curses, he shoved past the neighbor, fled down the hallway, and vanished into the night. Regina collapsed to her knees, sobbing as the neighbor called out to her, "Are you okay?" She couldn't speak. She just clung to Hope, who pressed against her, trembling. In that moment, everything else blurred: pain, fear, the chaos of a broken apartment. The only certainty was that they were alive, that help was on the way, and that she would never let anyone hurt Hope again. Police and an ambulance arrived minutes later. The living space was in disarray. Shattered glass, splintered wood, dark smears where Regina's blood had dripped. Paramedics checked Regina's injuries, gently cleaning a gash on her forehead and assessing a bruised rib. She insisted on refusing a hospital trip until she was sure Hope was unharmed. The dog was physically okay, though panting heavily and rattled. The police took her statement, the neighbor's statement, and collected evidence. They promised to do everything possible to find the intruder. A wave of relief and exhaustion made Regina's knees shake. She scooped Hope into her arms, ignoring the stab of pain in her side. For a long time, they just sat there, trembling together while the bustling officers sorted through the mess. When the last police car finally pulled away, Regina locked up the damaged door as best she could. She let out a shaky sigh, feeling the weight of everything that had transpired. She was bruised, bloodied, apartment wrecked, and yet a strange calm settled in. Hope was alive, and that was all that mattered. The neighbor offered to help board up the door until morning. Other tenants, awakened by the commotion, hovered in the hallway, offering whatever they could: bandages, a cup of tea, a place to stay for the night. Regina thanked them all, deeply moved. The sense of isolation that had once permeated her world had vanished. Here, in a battered building that had often felt cold and uncaring, she found a genuine community rallying around her in hope. That night, in a makeshift barricaded apartment, Regina slept fitfully with Hope nestled close, both of them jumpy at every sound. She kept a kitchen knife on the table beside her, fear still crawling under her skin. But the worst had passed. They had survived. Over the next few days, as the story spread, neighbors talked. The local news caught wind of the viral rescue dog almost snatched by an intruder. Regina received an outpouring of support. Anonymous donations, messages of solidarity, and even offers of a safer living space appeared. Although physically and emotionally drained, Regina felt buoyed by the kindness of strangers and friends alike. The police continued their search for the assailant, but leads were thin. Regina tried not to dwell on the possibility that he might return. Instead, she channeled her energy into healing, both her own injuries and Hope's lingering trauma. She noticed the dog's newfound fear of men's voices, how she'd tuck her tail and whimper if someone unfamiliar came too close. Regina gently worked on reintroducing calm, stable visitors, praising Hope for her bravery in baby steps. In the meantime, new beginnings ramped up their support. Helped Regina find a more secure apartment in a better neighborhood, an arrangement partially subsidized by donors who had fallen in love with Hope's story and wanted to ensure her safety. At first, Regina hesitated. She worried she was taking advantage of people's generosity. But when she saw how frightened Hope became at every noise in their old building, she knew a move was the right choice. Within a few weeks, they relocated. The new place was still modest, but it had a small fenced yard. On the first morning after the move, Regina opened the back door to let Hope explore. The dog stepped onto the grass, muzzle lifted to the crisp winter air, eyes bright with curiosity. Then, almost reverently, Hope trotted a few steps, sniffing at the ground where frost clung to the blades. Regina watched from the threshold, heart swelling. This was the beginning of a new chapter, free from the suffocating fear and haunting memories. As the sun rose higher, Hope turned and trotted back, pressing her forehead against Regina's legs in an unexpected show of affection. A grateful whine emerged, and Regina knelt, wrapping her arms around the dog who had changed her life in ways she never imagined. "We're safe now," she whispered. "No one's ever going to hurt you again." Word of Hope's story continued to ripple through social media, sparking discussions about animal neglect, the significance of standing up for those who can't protect themselves, and the surprising ways that compassion can save not just a life, but a spirit. Regina, once a quiet photographer content to work behind the scenes, found herself speaking at local shelters, sharing her experience and encouraging others to foster or adopt. She wasn't a celebrity or a hero, just a person who had refused to walk away from suffering. In the safety of their new home, day by day, Regina saw the final traces of terror fade from Hope's eyes. Yes, there would be triggers, fireworks, sudden footsteps, but those moments became fewer. More frequent were the times Regina would catch Hope napping contentedly in a sunbeam, or prancing across the yard after a squeaky toy. The dog, who had once been a trembling, emaciated ghost, now wore a gentle sparkle of contentment, as if she understood she was truly cherished. People who visited often remarked on how lucky Hope was. Regina always replied with a soft smile, "I'm the lucky one." Because in saving Hope, she had discovered within herself a fierce love, a courage she never knew existed. She had found meaning in the small daily battles of care and trust, in the quiet nights spent listening to Hope's steady breathing. She had witnessed the resilience of a living being who refused to give up, even when the world seemed only capable of cruelty. Their bond was woven from the threads of adversity, trust, and gratitude, forming an unbreakable tapestry. Whenever Regina felt overwhelmed or remembered the haunting chase up her apartment stairs, she would look at Hope and remember the simple act that had started it all. A hand extended in an alley, offering water to a dog that no one else saw. In time, the wounds healed, though the scars remained, a tangible reminder of a past that neither of them would ever quite forget. But perhaps that was part of the beauty, the scars to survival, and whenever Regina shared Hope's journey, she concluded with the same sentiment. No matter how bleak things seem, one act of kindness can change the course of a life. This dog had been starving, ignored, and left to die. But then a kind stranger dared to see her. The rest was a story so powerful that it ignited hope in countless others, reminding the world that compassion can indeed triumph, even in the darkest alley. And for Regina and Hope, every new day was a quiet, joyous victory, a testament to the fact that their story, born from pain and desperation, had grown into something worthy of the deepest love, the light, and the most unshakable bond. A bond that would last a lifetime, resonating long after the memory of that single shutter click in a lonely, trash-strewn corner faded into the past.